Hi, everybody, and welcome to Exegetically Speaking, a podcast of the friends and faculty of Wheaton College, Wheaton, Illinois, and the Lanier Theological Library in Houston, Texas. My name is David Capes, and I am the Senior Research Fellow at the Lanier Theological Library and a former dean up there in Wheaton at the School of Biblical and Theological Studies. Our purpose in these podcasts is really very simple. We want to promote the study of biblical languages, Greek, Hebrew, Aramaic, so we can read the Bible more faithfully, study it more fully, and not just read it, but to live it. Joining me today on Exegetically Speaking is Dr. Tim Brookins, Associate Professor of Classics at Houston Baptist University. Tim, thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me. It's very nice to see you.
Good to see you as well. Now, how did you get started reading Greek? Professor of Classics, come on. Greek and Latin, and do you do Latin too as well?
I do Latin, and actually Latin was my first ancient language that I learned. I started Latin in seventh grade and took it all through school and started Greek late. I didn't take a Greek course until my first semester of seminary, but kind of what happened is I saw the parallel with Latin, and you recognized that they were both part of this family of languages called Indo-European. They were very similar to each other, and I came alive again. And
so if you know Latin, then learning Greek is a little easier.
Absolutely easier.
Okay.
Yeah. And
does it go the other way too? If you know Greek, then learning Latin is a bit easier as well.
Absolutely. And, once you've got the kind of system down, this idea of an inflected language and a change in form means a change in function, then that once you've got that down in one language, then you've got the idea for the other as well. Mm-hmm. But Latin, of course, uses an alphabet almost identical to ours, which makes it a little bit easier.
Yeah, good. Well, today we're going to talk a little bit about Mark chapter 1, verse 8, and kind of the gist of this is it's possible to overanalyze, maybe, to overread a text and sing. Well, tell us what's going on in Mark chapter 1, verse 8.
Yeah, so we have an interesting text here where we have a saying of John the Baptist in Mark 1:8, which also occurs in the parallel passage in Matthew 3:11. And what it says, most translations are pretty much identical. I baptized you with water, but he will baptize you with the Holy Spirit. And so this antithesis in Greek is interesting because the two things that are being put in antithesis with each other are constructed differently in Greek. So with water uses the dative case, and one of the things that the dative case can do is indicate instrumentality. So the instrument that's used to accomplish something. So with water, meaning I baptize you by means of water, potentially. Whereas the other component with the Holy Spirit uses a preposition, the preposition en, which very often is local, meaning in the Holy Spirit. And so one thing that, that can happen for those who are learning Greek, the novice, they know just enough Greek to be dangerous, right? And they might
like
come
the
to
yellow belt in karate.
The yellow belt, right? He tries to take on, Chuck Norris. This is not gonna
go
well. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so some novice comes along and they say, well, actually, here in the Greek, the construction is different. And so in the Holy Spirit must mean in, kind of, we're being englobed or engulfed in the Holy Spirit, whereas there has to be some difference because hudati is constructed differently. It must be means, by means of water. Boom, I'm going to conclude that baptism is by means of water, not in water, and now we have defeated baptism by immersion. And that would be a total over-exegesis based...
Now, you're not just saying that because you teach at a Baptist school, right?
No, not at all.
Okay, well, good. So what happens when you get to Matthew? Is it the same in Matthew? Matthew's parallel passage?
Great question. So to begin with, it's an erroneous conclusion grammatically speaking, but in this case, there are some other complicating factors too. And one is that you do have this saying in Matthew as well, which is very, very similar, although not identical. But we, of course, don't have the original copies of Matthew. We call the autograph. We have copies, and in the course of transmission, sometimes variants arise. In other words, a scribe copies something a little differently than what he had, sometimes intentionally, sometimes unintentionally. But so the first issue, though, is that looking at it in Matthew actually uses the preposition both times. He doesn't just say hudati, by means of water. He says in hudati. And then he says in pneumatiki hagio, in the Holy Spirit. So if we were going to take Mark and try to make this fine syntactical distinction by means of water versus in the Holy Spirit, we come to Matthew in this parallel passage and we realize that might be invalid because Matthew does not actually make the distinction. The second problem is that when we look at the variants in the manuscript tradition, we have some manuscripts where hudati does have the preposition in Mark's gospel, meaning you have the preposition both with water, so in water, and with spirit, in the Holy Spirit. And so once again, if we're left in doubt as to which variant was originally there, it may indeed be that there was no distinction in Mark either, and we had the preposition both times.
So to conclude what you said about baptism, defeating baptism and by immersion, you can't really go there, can you?
You can't really go there, right? So this doesn't prove anything either way is the point. And with just enough knowledge of Greek, you might be a little overconfident in discovering, right? You might believe you're discovering something that you're not actually discovering.
That's why you got to take intermediate Greek and advanced Greek to be able to make use of this stuff.
That's what I tell them.
Yeah. Thanks, Dr. Tim Brookins, for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thanks to Silvio Vasquez, Rebecca Larson, and Krista Sanchez for helping us to produce this podcast. Thanks as well to Phil Keggy for our music. If you want to study biblical languages, the best place you could do that is Wheaton College. They have an amazing program, one of the best I've ever seen, whether you want to be a graduate or an undergraduate student. So go to the website, www.wheaton.edu, and look for modern and classical languages. Get started today. If you have questions or comments about this podcast, we'd love to hear from you. Contact us at exegetically.speaking@wheaton.edu. That's exegetically.speaking@wheaton.edu. Thanks for listening.